Good day, parents, guardians, and young scholars. I am Brenton Jackson with Secondary Curriculum, and I have the honor today of being your teacher. We're going to work through a strategy that's great for all middle school grades 6 through 8 using the book, head, heart strategy with informational text. Before we get too deep into this, I want to take a moment, just get our brain juices flowing, and I want you to respond to this quick write. What does this mean to you? The phrase or the saying, practice makes perfect. Take 5 minutes to write down anything that comes to mind when you hear that saying. Again, I want you to pause the video for 5 minutes. I want you to write for 5 minutes without stopping. What comes to your mind when you hear the phrase or the saying, practice makes perfect? Now I'm going to share my response with you. When I think about the saying, practice makes perfect, it reminds me of learning multiplication in elementary school. My teachers made us recite and write them over and over again. Weekly, we had multiplication drills and were given 1 minute to answer 60 items. This stressed me out. I always wanted to finish first, but I never did. Joseph always beat me. Week after week, my teachers hammered higher and harder multiplication facts into our heads, but their efforts worked. All these years later, I still remember, and that's where I ran out of time. So take a moment. You can share your writing with someone at home, or if you're ready to move on, we can definitely move on. Now, today, as I already mentioned, we're going to be using the book, head, heart strategy as we're replying to this informational text. So let's first look at what the book, head, heart strategy is. First and foremost, as you can see on the screen here, the first questions address the actual book. What is it about? Well, who's telling the story? What does the author want me to know? So the first question of book, head, heart is you just looking at what the book is actually saying to you. Secondly is what's in my head. What surprised me? What did the author think I already knew? What challenge, changed, or confirmed what I already knew? So challenge means what made me rethink what I thought I knew. Change means it changed my mind. And of course, confirm means I already knew that, and this article helped me to reinforce what I already knew. And lastly, what did I notice? Now, we don't want to just make a head connection with the text. We also want to how does it tug at our heartstrings? So you'll answer questions like, what have I learned about me? How will this help me to be better? And what did I take to heart? So when you read something, how does it change who you are? How does it impact who you are? What part of this text will you take with you for the rest of your life? And what moral, what lesson have you learned from this? So that's the heart part. So that is how we're going to address book, head, heart when it comes to our text for today. So I want you to keep these questions in mind as you are reading through this text. Again, it's book, head, and then finally heart. So our text for today can be found on page 357 in the 7th grade textbook. Again, our text for today can be found on page 357 in the 7th grade textbook. And the title of our text, as you can see on the screen, is Learning Rewires the Brain. Now, a good writer doesn't waste page space. So everything on the page matters, including the title. So I'm looking at the title and I see Learning Rewires the Brain. And that word rewires kind of sticks out to me. How can my brain be rewired? So I made the note that rewired means like changes. Maybe even it changes and it's improved. So you see that note that I made here as I am reading. As you read, I want you to make sure that you are annotating. What is annotation? It is a note. Those are the notes you make as you are reading to help you understand what you're reading. I want you to have a conversation with the text. Whatever comes to mind that you deem important as you're reading, I want you to write those things down. So for me, as I read the title again, the word rewires was important to me. And so I kind of wrote some notes around that. Rewires for me means to change something and possibly even changing something for the better. So changing with improvements. Okay, so the title does definitely matter. So throughout the text, we're going to be making notes as we read. And also keep those things in mind from our book head heart. What is the story trying to tell us? Who's telling the story? How does it touch our heart? What's going on in our head as we are reading? So let's hide this for a moment and make a little space on the page. Now, again, everything on the page matters. If the author took their time to put a picture with a caption on here, then that picture and caption very likely is important. Let's read. An artist's depiction of an electrical signal, yellow-green regions, shooting down a nerve cell and then off to others in the brain. Learning strengthens the paths that these signals take, essentially wiring certain common paths through the brain. Now, that's a lot of words to try to describe this picture, but what note have I made here? I said, think about it like it is a trail. Oh, let's get it together. Like it's a trail in the grass that's been worn down over time. That's how they're explaining how these nerves in our brain work. The orange parts are signals being sent through our brain. And the more and more those signals are sent through our brain, the better and more easily they're able to make it through those paths. So again, think about like a path in the grass that gets worn down. Okay. The more people travel that path, the more easily you're able to walk through the path because it's been worn down from people coming through again and again and again. And so that's how this message works in our mind. The more we send that message from one side of the brain to the other, the more easily that message can get across from those sides of the brain. So it's a lot of words to describe a fairly simple happening. Let's keep reading. Musicians, athletes, and quiz bowl champions all have one thing in common: training. Learning to play an instrument or a sport requires time and patience. It is all about steadily mastering new skills. The same is true when it comes to learning information, preparing for the quiz bowl, say, or studying for a big test. As teachers, coaches, and parents everywhere like to say, practice makes perfect. We've heard that before. Doing something over and over again doesn't just make it easier, it actually changes the brain. That may come as a surprise, but exactly how that process happens has long been a mystery. Scientists have known that the brain continues to develop through our teenage years, but these experts used to think that those changes stopped once the brain matured. Let's stop there. We've taken in a lot of information. Let's stop there. And I made a note here about what I have just read. Let's see what that note says. This is what they once thought. So what do they believe now? If we go back and read this, it says that scientists have known that the brain continues to develop through our teenage years. But that word, anytime we see that word but, it's going to signal some kind of shift or change in the idea that we are presenting. So here it says that scientists have known that the brain continues to develop throughout teenage years. But these experts used to think that those changes stopped once our brain matured. So they once thought this, but obviously something is changing their mind through their continued research. Let's keep reading. But these experts used to think that those changes stopped once the brain matured. No more. Recent data have been showing that the brain continues to change over the course of our lives. Cells grow, they form connections with new cells, some stop talking to others, and it's not just nerve cells that shift and change as we learn. Other brain cells also get into the act. Scientists have begun unlocking these secrets of how we learn, not only in huge blocks of tissue, but even individual cells. So I made a note here. What do these different cells do? Now, so again, when you're annotating, you're having a conversation with the text. As I'm reading this, it says that all these cells do something, but I'm not quite certain what these cells do. So I'm questioning the text now. What do these cells do? I want to find out. Will I? Who knows? Let's see. Now remember, everything on the page matters. So we have a diagram here or a picture with a caption here, okay? We're going to go back and read that in a moment. I'll show you why. But remember, everything on the page matters. Don't skip anything. Our next section has a subtitle, Rewiring. Now, subtitles, as a note I made here, is something we oftentimes see inside of informational text. When they present new ideas or they present new findings, they will sometimes title those with a subtitle. Sub means below. We already have a big title. Now, these are smaller titles within the work. Sub means below that bigger title. And again, this is a component you oftentimes see in informational text. Let's read. The brain is not one big blob of tissue. Just 6 to 7 weeks into the development of a human embryo, the brain starts to form into different parts. So a human embryo is like the very small baby inside of a mother's stomach. And even at that small, the brain starts to develop and the parts of the brain, according to this article, takes different tasks. Later, these areas will each take on different roles. Consider the prefrontal cortex. It's the region right behind the forehead. That's where you solve problems. Other parts of the cortex, the outer layer of the brain, helps process sights and sounds. Deep in the brain, the hippocampus helps store memories. It also helps you figure out where things are located around you. So I made a note here. Remember, I'm making notes as I read. And I said there are different parts of the brain and each has its own purpose. Now, so that's what we're learning here about all these different parts of the brain, the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex and the cortex. Okay, we're learning about how all these different parts of the brain have their own purpose. Let's keep reading. Scientists can see what part of the brain is active by using functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI. At the heart of every fMRI device is a strong magnet. It allows the device to detect changes in blood flow. Now, when a scientist asks a volunteer to perform a particular task, such as playing a game or learning something new, the machine reveals where blood flow within the brain is highest. That boost in blood flow highlights which cells are busy working. I made a note here. Blood rushes to the areas being used most. So what I took from what I just read is that they put you in a machine and they'll have you play a game or they'll have you learn a new task, and they can determine which parts of your brain are working based on how much blood is flowing to that area. Okay. So again, they put you in a machine that measures how blood is moving around in your head. And blood rushes to the parts that needs the most use, like the hippocampus, the prefrontal cortex, the cortex, depending on what part of your brain is being used. Blood rushes to that part. Let's keep reading. Many brain scientists use fMRI to map brain activity. Others use another type of brain scan known as a positron emission tomography, or PET scan. Experts have performed dozens of such studies. Each look at how specific areas of the brain respond to specific tasks. Nathan Spring did something a little different. He decided to study the studies. Spring is a neuroscientist at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. A neuroscientist studies the brain and nervous system. Spring wanted to know how the brain changes, how it morphs a little bit as we learn. He teamed up with two other researchers. Together, they analyzed 38 of these earlier studies. Each study had used an fMRI or PET scan to probe which regions of the brain turn on when people learn new tasks. Now, there's a lot of reading. Let's look at my notes, my annotations thus far. I said Spring It's going back to read the studies that others have already done. So according to our reading thus far, Spring is not actually putting people in MRIs. He's not actually running PET scans. He's looking at research that people have already done. He's bringing all that research together. It says 38 of those earlier studies. He's bringing all that research together to now perform a new set of research. Let's keep reading. Areas that allow people to pay attention become most active as someone began a new task, but those attention areas become less active over time. Meanwhile, areas of the brain linked with daydreaming and mind wandering become more active as people become more familiar, with the task. At the beginning, you require a lot of focused attention, Spring says. Learning to swing a bat requires a great deal of focus when you first try to hit a ball. But the more you practice, Spring says, the less you have to think about what you're doing. Now, I highlighted this last sentence of this 13th paragraph in its entirety. But the more you practice, Spring says, the less you have to think about what you're doing. That's something a good writer does. Remember, this writer opened up this text by saying, we all know the term practice makes perfect. Now, throughout the text, the writer, the female writer, she's referring back to that place up above where we made a connection with the text. So here he's talking about practice. He says the more and more you practice, the less and less of your brain you have to use. Okay, let's look at what my note says. I said this is an important detail. Why? Because one, we see this idea that practice improves us coming up over and over again. If a writer takes time to repeat an idea over and over again, we can definitely infer that idea is very likely important. Okay. Now, you're going to read the remainder of this text. You know what? Never mind. I'm going to read one more paragraph. Extensive practice can even allow a person to perform a task while thinking about others or about nothing at all. A professional pianist, for example, can play a complex piece of music without thinking about which notes to play next. In fact, stopping to think about the task can actually interfere with a flawless performance. This is what musicians, athletes, and others often refer to as being in the zone. Now, I highlighted and made a notation about being in the zone because that's another familiar phrase to me. I said it's a familiar phrase meaning that someone is in a mental place where they perform a task well. I'm thinking about Kobe or LeBron or what's the gymnast name? The little short gymnast from Spring, Texas. Her name just left me. Whatever her name is. I'm thinking about them, how focused they are, and how they used to doing the task over and over again, and they're in the zone. You know, what do all of those people have in common? We know Kobe practiced a lot. We know LeBron practiced a lot. We know that short girl whose name I cannot think of, who's from Spring, Texas, and Olympian. We know that they practice a lot. Okay, and so why is that important? Because the whole idea of our text is that through practicing something over and over again, it changes how our brain works and makes it work even better. Okay. All right. So now you're going to read the remainder of this text. Okay. As you're reading, I want you to make annotations through the text. And you see there's other pictures and captions. Remember, pictures and captions are going to be important. Okay. You have more subtitles listed. You know, those subtitles are probably important. Okay. And you do have some vocabulary that is highlighted for you. You can click on that vocabulary and it will open up its definition. If you're working online, if not, if you're working in the book, they may be off to the side. Okay. You're going to continue reading this and annotating as you read. Now, remember, we're doing this with the purpose in mind. Our purpose that we have in mind is to respond to these questions, okay? So I want you to keep these questions in mind as you're annotating, but also I want you to be able to respond to all of them once you finish reading. Let's go through them one more time. First, it's book. What is the book about? Who's telling the story? What does the author want me to know? Head. What surprises me? What did the author think I already knew? What challenged, changed, or confirmed what I already knew? Did I notice as I was reading? And lastly, the heart connection. What have I learned about me? How will this help me be better? And what did I take to heart? Keep those questions in mind as you are reading through this text. So we talked a lot about practice and how practice makes perfect, how those like Kobe and LeBron and Simone Biles, I found her name, how they practice their craft over and over again and become so great at it. But we must also practice reading. Just 10 minutes a day can greatly impact what you can learn and how you learn it. Reading is so important. So find you a book, a magazine, a comic book, a newspaper, get your Kindle out, your phone, find a website of poetry you like. You need to be reading something every single day of your life. Okay. So right now I'm going to read a book I love. It's actually a picture book. And yes, I'm a grown man and I still read picture books. And it's called Love. And it is by Matt De La Pena. In the beginning, there is light, and two wide eyed figures standing near the foot of your bed, and the sound of their voices is love. A cab driver plays love softly on his radio while you bounce in back with the bumps of the city, and everything smells new, and it smells like life. Love, too, is the smell of crashing waves and the train whistling blindly in the distance. And each night, the sky above your trailer turns the color of love. In a crowded concrete park, you toddle toward summer sprinklers while older kids skip rope and run up the side, and soon you are running among them, and the echo of your laughter is love. On the night the fire alarm blares, you're pulled from sleep and whisked into the street where a quiet old lady is pointing to the sky. Stars shine long after they've flamed out, she tells you, and the shine they shine with is love. But it's not only stars that flame out, you discover it's summers too, and friendships, and people. One day you find your family nervously huddled around the TV, but when you ask what happened, they answer with silence and shift between you and the screen. In your dreams that night, you are searching for a love that seems lost. You open and close drawers, lift cushions, empty old toy bins, but there's nothing. You wake up with a start in the arms of a loved one who bends to your ear and whispers, "It's okay, it's okay, it's love." And in time, you learn to recognize a love overlooked, a love that wakes up at dawn and rides to work on the bus, a slice of burned toast that tastes like love. And it's love in each deep crease on your grandfather's face as he lowers himself onto an overturned bucket to fish. And it's love in the rustling leaves of snarled trees lined behind the flower fields. And it's love in the make-up stories your uncles tell in the backyard between wild horseshoe throws. And the man in rags outside the subway station plays love notes that lift into the sky like tiny beacons of light. And the face staring back in the bathroom mirror, this too is love. So when the time comes for you to set off on your own, heavy winds will sweep past your building and great gray clouds will congregate above. Your loved ones will stand there like puddles beneath their umbrellas, holding you tight and kissing you and wishing you luck. But it won't be luck you'll leave with because you'll have love. You'll have love, love, love. And that's Love by Matt De La Pina. So once again, I am Brenton Jackson with Secondary Curriculum, and it has been a joy to be with you today. Remember to complete reading the article and annotating. Also, make sure you make time for independent reading. I look forward to seeing you again, and be good and take care.